So let's talk about engagement. One way to understand engagement: to what degree does an employee use their discretionary energy to accomplish more or better work? This issue of engagement has become the source of competitive advantage in our current market. You know, if you've got way more capital than somebody else, that's definitely an advantage. If you've got a patent or a copyright that someone else doesn't have, definitely a competitive advantage. But there's a lot of folks who are just head to head, just going at it, trying to win out there. And if you're going to win in the workplace, engaged employees is simply mandatory. It's just got to happen. So we're going to talk about the steps to get there today. Good management is the art of making problems so interesting and their solutions so constructive that everyone wants to get to work and deal with them. The first challenge to get over as a manager to make sense of your role is that the problems are your greatest gift, because they are what allow you to set up your frontliner to be the hero of the story. And you can come alongside of them by listening to their problems, listening to what those problems are, helping them overcome those problems, and the story of their work experience engages them in that way. Every employee who's facing a challenge, whether they're conscious of it or not, they're sort of telling their own story in the face of these problems. If the manager doesn't do their function of helping those problems get either removed or overcome, the natural tendency is that something is the problem, and the frontliner begins to think, well, then it's the manager who's the problem. And so they turn and look at you, and you become the obstacle they want to overcome. And now you've got a real problem. So first of all, where does some of this disengagement come from? Sometimes expectations are not clear. Sometimes the tools are not provided. Feedback, how am I doing? All of these things, if they're not getting them, frontliners will begin to disengage. The number one reason, however, across all studies, is that employees do not feel like they're being heard. I mean, you've said this yourself. You've had your friends say this to you. Those people, they don't care. They don't listen. They're not paying attention. I'm out there. The metaphor we often use is the wiggly shovel handle, right? If it's my job to go out behind this building and dig holes with a shovel, and the handle on that shovel is wiggly, and it makes it hard to dig the holes, I have two questions. Does anybody know, and does anybody care, right? And if I know someone knows and I know someone cares and they're wanting to do something about it, I will engage and dig holes the best that I can with that wiggly shovel, right? Y'all, this is how businesses win in the marketplace. This is how they win. Our lives are filled with wiggly shovel handles. Life is incredibly imperfect. There's really no work environment where everything is so pristine and so perfect that there are no wiggly shovel handles. The issue is, does someone know? Does someone care? Does it look like they're going to do something about it? And then for now, I'll engage. But if it looks like no one's listening, my opinion doesn't count. You know, given that we have wiggly shovel handles, could we dig over there instead of here? No one cares. No one's going. That's the zone where employees begin to disengage because they feel that their opinions don't count. The frontliners are there with the customers. They're the ones creating the value. And this is another perspective, managers, that it's just important to own it. Their feedback, it may sound like whining at times, but all in the midst of all that whining are jewels, are gold mines for you to create the experience of engagement for them. So at the core of the problem is that it's about listening to frontliners and removing those obstacles and barriers so that they can thrive in their work. It's understanding that all the value that's being generated in a company is being generated by the frontliners, whoever is either interacting with a customer or is creating the widget that company creates. If I make money by manufacturing shoes, then the margin that's created by those shoes being manufactured is the value created. No value is created outside of that function. And so all the support, all the other stuff that goes into it, it has to create value in those shoes. And if those people become disengaged, the value isn't there. So what not to say to employees? The most common thing that managers tell employees about problems is, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. If you got something to say to me, make it something I want to hear, essentially. We want to encourage you to stop saying that. Don't say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. Bring me the problems. Bring me whatever you've got. Tell me what's really going on, what's really frustrating you. What to say to employees is things like, I want to hear about your problems, your ideas, and your solutions. I want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because of the way communication works up and down in an organization, sometimes there's pressure from higher up to bring good news and not bad news. And when that happens, sometimes it encourages a communication where the bad news just gets kind of shoved under a rug. But we're saying, no, I want to hear about all the problems, the ideas, the solutions, all of it, good, bad, ugly. We're not looking to blame anybody. We just want to find solutions. We want to be advocates. We want to help remove the obstacles so that we can all succeed. That's the message you want to send to your frontliners. The two basic obstacles that keep managers from being able to do this effectively and consistently are these two things. The fear of what may happen when they ask, and then not knowing for sure how to handle the tension that comes from this. This is a fascinating thing that happens. When we talk to managers and we first encourage them to start doing this, one of the quick questions that comes up is, what if they think I'm actually going to be able to do something about it? Because the manager is thinking, I don't know if I can do anything about any of this, right? Because remember, we didn't promise we're going to get new shovels. We're just saying, look, we want to find out what's going on, and we're going to find out if we can get new shovels. But if we can't, we still have to have a job to do. So managers begin to fear, what happens when I start asking this? Do I get a floodgate that opens and I get, all kinds of things? Am I sending the message somehow that I can do something more than I can do, and then they feel betrayed by me because it... So that's one of the obstacles. And the other one is, when this conversation really begins, and really begins genuinely, a lot of frontliners are just really ticked off. They really are. And so there's a tension that can come from this. Down in that bottom circle where the frontliners live, that's where the problems really are. And oftentimes they're discussed in both professional and unprofessional ways. All those problems that the gossip, the rumors, the riffraff, all that junk that gets talked about over the water cooler, that's all your gold, right? That's the stuff you want to hear about. But it may come to you and spill out in some unprofessional ways and even some accusational ways. And if they've lived with these problems for a long time, they assume it's your fault, that you haven't done anything about it. It's okay. We're gonna get this thing aligned and get it fixed. But realize when they start talking about it, it's gonna spill out with negativity. It could spill out with accusation. It could spill out with distrust. You can count on the fact that every frontliner in your company, every one of them, has got a list of at least 2 or 3 things that they keep in their back pocket, and they assume I'll never have the chance to speak to this stuff. But if they do, there's real issues there. It's just a matter of getting them to talk about it. So we like to use this little target model here to show how this thing plays out. So let's say I'm a frontliner at company X, and I've got an idea that no one listens to, or I've got a frustration that no one pays attention to. And my challenge, let's say my wiggly shovel handle. Okay, I'm out behind the building, I'm trying to dig holes, no one's paying attention. So my first reaction is frustration. That frustration just kind of lasts for a while, but frustration doesn't just stay frustration. Eventually, it sort of blossoms into anger and cynicism. Depending on the personality that you have, if you're much more extroverted, then it's going to show up as anger. If you're a little bit more introverted, it's going to show up more as cynicism. And sort of the next time they roll out an idea, you're thinking, right, they can't even fix my shovel. We're going to do this? Probably. Yeah, we'll see. This is what disengagement looks like, y'all. We'll see. Frontliners who say, you can't fix my shovel. They're saying we're going to do all this stuff. I'll smile and nod, but we'll see. That stance, because who's going to make it happen? It's the frontliners, right? It's the frontliners who are going to execute anything that matters in the company. And if the frontliners are saying we'll see, what they're saying is, I'm not going to do it. Well, if everybody that's frontline is saying I'm not going to do it, it's already doomed to fail, right? So that cynicism, that anger, it's creating, that's just what disengagement looks like. So then ultimately, when they've got, something's got to happen, it shows up then as drama, right? Either creating a scene or I don't know, big broad statements of I'm going to quit. I was working with a company recently that had difficulty because they had someone leave and they wanted to come back, and they said, was it okay? And when I drilled down to it, it came down to this situation right here. He didn't really want to leave. He just didn't know how to get anybody else to listen to him. And so he just got up one day and he said, I quit. And they all said, oh, this guy's so unpredictable. He's so disloyal. Should we bring him back in? Well, when I sat down and talked to him, it was like, yeah, you should bring him back in. He wants to work here. He wants to add value, but somebody's got to pay attention to what's going on. Okay, so here's the 9 steps. Let's get into them. The first one is don't take it personally. When you talk with employees, always assume that those 3 layers are very real to them, and those 3 layers matter to them just as much as the issue itself. And when they spill out on you, it will feel like you are being accused. It will feel like you are being called out. Because again, who's in charge of this band? That's you. And so that's going to come out accusationally. There's really no other way to do it. Number 2, don't attack or get defensive or explain back. There's a couple of versions of this. It's a natural human response. If someone is attacking you, it's natural to say, kind of push back. Well, what about you, right? But that's not the response that will keep them talking. The response that will keep them talking is simply saying, let me briefly apologize for this, but I want to hear everything you've got to say. I'm not going to justify anything that you've seen. I'm not going to justify anything you've heard. I just want you to keep telling me what the challenge is so that we can really get down to the solution, all right? Another thing that shuts them down at this point is the explain back stance. Oh, see, we do that. Well, let me tell you why we do that. Even if it is completely justified, even if if they just knew this, then maybe they would not even have a problem with it. But now's not the time to do that. Now is the time. You can do that later. Now is the time to just hear it. Because if you explain back now, it creates this sense of shutting them down. Like okay, I shut down that one, what else you got? And at that point, they'll stop talking again. It's learning how to listen, and listening means you don't come back with a response as to why the person might be wrong for what they said. You'll get a chance to do that later, but not yet. So don't attack or get defensive or explain back. Number 3, let them express their drama, all right? Another way to say this is let them tell you what they need to tell you however they need it to come out. We worked with Maurice and I worked with a company, and we did this in a kind of large group setting where we kind of poked them to talk to us until eventually somebody said, I don't think my job's at risk if I say this out loud in this setting. And the way they kind of positioned it was like, but you know what? I don't care. I'm going to let it come out anyway. And with there was a lot of people sitting there with the most foul language and things said about the people and things said about the organization. All this stuff just spilled out. Now at the core, there was a jewel, but that's the way it needed to come out in that situation. Your goal is to help them get through those layers, all right? Don't coach them at this point on don't be so dramatic. Just get to the data. Step number 4, repeat back what they said and show that you heard. If they tell it to you in a highly dramatic way, don't repeat back the drama, but repeat back the data. So what I'm hearing you say is that you have been back behind this building for quite some time, and your shovel handle wiggles. You've tried to tell people and no one's listened, and this has really become a real frustration for you. So show them that you heard. Number 5, take notes. There's something really powerful that happens when someone sees you with some kind of notepad and a pen and they're actually writing down what you've said. It communicates even more. I'm really listening. I'm going to do something with this information. I'm not going to have another meeting, because y'all know this happens all the time in workplaces all over America. We have a meeting and then a week later we come back and say, what did we say in that meeting last week? What did we say? Okay, this isn't the one you want to have that with, because if you blow it, they're going to shut down even more. So take notes and make sure you're documenting what they're saying so that you can validate them and you can then do something about it. Number 6 then, validate that their frustration is real. If I was in your shoes, I think I probably would feel just the same way that you do. You know, the frustration you're facing, all of this is such a decompression for them at that point. They don't need to carry the frustration because it can now be released. And so this all gets you back down to that original little light bulb in the center of the target. Validate their frustration as being real. Say things like, I'm understanding that you were at a place of almost unbreakable frustration, and you've almost given up on telling me or telling us what's going on. I understand. Number 7, ask them for their opinion on a possible solution. This is where, don't communicate that you whatever they say is what your follow-up is going to be, because it may or may not be that. It may be that for what you're looking at, there's nothing you can actually do about it. You just have to acknowledge it and encourage them through it until there is something you can do about it. There was a toothpaste company, and they were having a problem because as toothpaste was being manufactured, put in the tubes, the tube put in the little boxes put into a case, and then shipped. Well, sometimes the tubes were not getting to the little box, and the box was going into the case to be shipped, and there was no toothpaste in there, no tube, right? So an executive from a drugstore called the executive of the toothpaste company that he knew and said, we have a problem. The executive, who did what many good executives will do, is identify a solution and make it happen. And so they studied the scenario without really engaging anybody in the front line about it, and decided the best way to handle this problem was to create a new kind of machine and add it to the assembly line that would weigh the boxes as they came through. If a box came through that didn't weigh enough, they'd know the toothpaste wasn't in it. It would set off a little alarm, and the assembly line would stop. Someone would come over, take out the empty box, start the assembly line back up again, and away we go. The issue is they spent $8 million on this machine, okay? But if it solves this problem, then it must be worth it. Well, about 3 weeks later, they noticed that the alarm quit going off. And so they went down to see what was going on. And as it happens, the frontliner, who had to get up and remove the box, got tired of getting up and removing the box. So he got this idea. I think if I go to Walmart and I buy myself a $20 fan and I set it next to the assembly line, it will scooch the little boxes when there's nothing in them. When they scooch, if they don't blow off by themselves, I'll just knock them off the assembly line, and then I don't have to get up like this. It worked. So the moral of the story is this. $8 million was spent on a solution that was really a $20 fix. One of the things that will show up again and again and again, I've seen this so many times, I know it's true, I know it from firsthand experience, the most inexpensive real solutions almost always come from frontliners. And the reason is that the higher someone goes in a company, the more aware of the dollars they are and the scope of the company, and this unconscious thing happens where if they want to solve a problem, they think of it in the scope of this whole company, and it just starts magnifying it into a larger expense to solve this problem. Frontliners don't think that way. They think about the world that they're in right in front of them, right? So the solution that they come up with is almost always going to be less expensive. So when you're asking them for their opinion on a possible solution, this is another source of gold for your company. Now, meanwhile, on the engagement level, this is also a reason to keep them engaged. We want to work with them in terms of what do you think should be done. And if that's not what can be done, we at least want to acknowledge going back that we have reviewed this and the right people have taken a look at it. What do you think the issue is that will probably allow us to fix this? Number 8, listen to what they tell you with sincerity. All right? If they tell you, well, look, this is easy. We just need to quit digging holes and get a big backhoe to dig these holes behind this building. Well, you may say, look, we don't have $75,000 to buy a backhoe. That's why we have you back here with a shovel. But that, again, that's not the message. Listen with sincerity. What are those solutions that they have? There may be none of them that you can use, but the listening itself is part of the solution. And then number 9, validate them by validating their idea. No matter what they tell you, this is a principle that we really live by at Team Real World. No matter what they tell you, good idea. Good idea. This kind of magical thing happens when you train yourself to say this to everybody around you, because when an idea is put out there, it's very connected to the person who said the idea, who's putting it out there. But when you say good idea, you're really speaking to that person, and it allows the idea to separate from the person, and you can now hash up that idea however you need to, and it doesn't become offensive anymore because you've given the affirmation to the person who put the idea out there. So it's critically important that you send this message while you're listening to these ideas so that if you can't do the things they're suggesting, they don't have a basis for you to come back and be frustrated with it, okay? When they tell you what they think should happen, it could be dumb, it could be wild, it could be too expensive, it could be way apart from the way your brand functions. Who knows? Who knows? But make sure you communicate good idea, but that it has to be refined before we could get started on anything. When you listen to their idea and you do something meaningful with it, you come back to them and ask them for more ideas, their engagement after those meetings goes way up. They're more connected to the work itself. And let me just make one other comment. When we work with companies, we can almost measure how frustrated the workforce is by how many parties they're having. Parties are to engagement what dessert is to nutrition, right? If you want to feel like, look, I just want to have people for a little while say, yay, this food tastes great, give them some dessert. But a steady diet of dessert, you know what happens. I know what happens. Believe me, I know what happens. Steady diet of dessert does not create health, right? The same thing is true if you try to create engagement by doing something other than dealing with the work itself. What's getting in the way in the work itself? What's not working when I try to do this work? What are the things that I don't know how to do and I have to know how to do them? What are the tools that I need and I don't have them, or the ones I have don't work? If they're dealing with those kinds of challenges and you try to create an encouragement by saying, yeah, but you know what, Thursday afternoon after work, we're all going out and it's on the company tab. Woo! Well, everybody will go and everybody will have a good time. But what happens at Friday morning? I still got to come back to my job. I still got to look at this hole that's half dug. I still got to look at my shovel and go, here we go again. This thing that we're talking about, of talking to them about the real problems in their work, the real frustrations they have, when you listen to that and you come back with something meaningful, their engagement skyrockets. And again, remember we talked at the beginning, their discretionary effort skyrockets. So let's go back to this quote we had at the beginning. Good management is the art of making problems so interesting and their solutions so constructive that everyone wants to get to work and deal with them. I think we've filled in some of why that's the case. How does that work? How is it that problems can be interesting and solutions that constructive? It's by helping that frontliner become the hero of the story and working beside them to overcome those problems together.